Hello and welcome once again to the Creative Writing Podcast, the writing workshop that you can do at a time that suits you. We are out a little bit later on this Saturday. I'll come clean. I woke up this morning with absolutely no ideas in my mind about what this would be about, and it took a while for inspiration to strike, but it has done. And I'm hoping that this is going to be quite a fun one, all about reflections and distortions. And they're rolled in stories and a little bit of an exercise in using one to kick off a story or provide you with some inspiration. As always, you'll need a Word document or the notes app on your phone or a good old-fashioned notebook and a pencil. So this is a creative writing workshop. Imagine that you have travelled to a classroom, maybe in like an old romantic university building. That would be fun, wouldn't it? And you've sat down and you've got ready to work, and I am your tutor and I'm going to be leading you through the exercise. So the quiet moments in between me talking are an invitation for you to put pen to paper. And the reason I do this is that I really believe there are two elements to developing a writing practice or developing creative writing as a hobby or heading towards being a professional. On the one hand, you need to gather knowledge about how stories work and what you should be aiming for, how modern novels work, what publishers look for. And there's an enormous amount of information on the internet all about that. But on the other hand, you also have to practice as if you were learning a musical instrument. You have to repeatedly sit down, put pen to paper. And that is what we do here, is just give you the I'm going to look after the time, and you are going to just put the words down and see what happens to them. It's about developing writing stamina. It's about also experimenting with different elements of the craft, different sort of techniques and devices, looking at characters, looking at plot, and um, using these little nuggets, these little writing prompts, just to see what happens, either with characters that you're working on already or kicking off something entirely new. We always start with a warm-up exercise. Here it comes. As always, the purpose of the next sort of 6 to 7 minutes is that you just put pen to paper, you keep going, you don't worry about anything at all. No one's ever going to see this. You can throw it away. It's just to get your imagination and your hands and your back and your shoulders and everything warmed up. It literally is like warming up for a sport. And this is a bit of a tricky one today, but let's see how we go with it. I would like you to describe the surface of water. So you might imagine an ocean or a pond, a glass, a tiny bowl. But I would like you to begin by describing the surface of water. Let's just see where that takes us. And if your instinct was to begin with movement, you might think about light or what happens when that water goes deeper. And if you haven't yet and you need a little bit of a refocus, then have a think about what might be in that water. And in the last 30 seconds of the warm up, potentially we're going to try and find a decent place to finish. So the end of a description, the completion of a little bit of dialogue or internal monologue. Sometimes even a small warm-up exercise is enough to really kick you off into a seam that you can mine, an idea, an image. So if that was enough for you today, then just hit pause and just keep going and see where it takes you. But if you're going to move along with me, then um, we're going to just move on to have a think about reflections and distortions. And these often come through these reflective surfaces, our characters encountering these kind of slightly mysterious, odd visual tricks. There are a lot of times in a novel when you want things to be visible to your main characters, but perhaps not quite understandable. And a reflective surface can be used in all sorts of ways and in all sorts of genres. Obviously, if you write fantasy and magic, then you have this enormous, rich history and sort of level of expectation that you can draw on. But if you write, say, contemporary romance, then the idea of reflections in wine glasses and mirrors and the way that a mirror can allow us to see a relationship developing when the people can't quite see us and allow us to misunderstand that relationship. If you write crime, then looking through windows, the distortion of, rain-soaked car windows and everything. There are all sorts of things you can do, not only with reflections, which is what we'll mainly concentrate on today, but also distortions and sort of ways of seeing. Of course, this kind of visual trick is something that film does incredibly well, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a place in prose and that we can't play with it as prose writers. And if you're a screenwriter and you jump into this podcast for ideas, then you're in slightly different territory, but this will still be a very useful episode for you. Of course, there's a huge history of reflective surfaces in folktale and myth. So we have the archetypal magic mirror, we have Narcissus staring forever at his own reflection. We have treasure hoards so enormous that they dazzle anyone who discovers them. We can also have reflective surfaces as portals to other worlds. So, of course, there's Alice Through the Looking Glass, or C.S. Lewis's The Magician's Nephew, which is, I think, one of my favorite books as a child. Some of the magical landscapes that he conjures and the sense of sort of worryingly losing your mind in those worlds, I think is really effective. And as a child was just completely kind of intriguing and magical to me. If we think about when we can't see an expected reflection, then obviously we get to vampires. So, you know, a reflective surface has a lot of expectations within it. We expect the reflection to roughly be what's in the room, and when it isn't, then of course it's incredibly worrying. So, um, let's get on with it then, and we're going to do a piece of writing in which a reflection or reflective surface takes center stage. But before we get there, we're going to begin with a location and a person. So I say this in every episode. You can use this writing session to work on a character who you're developing for a piece of writing that you're working on. And all of these are great little exercises into investigating that character and spending some time with them away from the main plot and really getting to know them. But if you don't have one of those and you're coming to this fresh, then you're going to grab yourself a name and an age of a person you're going to write about. We don't need to know anything more about them than that. They will reveal the nature of their character through the writing. That is actually mostly how I develop my characters. I just set them free in the world and see where they end up. Um, so your character, with their name and their age, steps into a place they shouldn't be in. So perhaps they're wandering around a house they are a guest in. Maybe they've walked beyond a simple rope barrier in a museum into some cordoned off little room or corridor. Maybe they've lost the road in a wood and have stepped into a glade. Maybe they're in a department store and have stepped out of a lift onto the wrong floor. That's up to you, but a place where they feel they don't quite belong. And for the moment, they're going to be on their own. And we'll begin just with a description of them arriving in this place. We're going to really root them and allow our reader to really understand the location, the setting. So a character in a place they shouldn't be in. Off we go. And now in this place, your character sees a reflective surface. It could be metal or water or glass, that's up to you. The size of the surface is also completely up to you. And you can borrow from your warm-up exercise if you like, or choose something quite different. But your character wants to investigate this reflective surface further. Whether it's beautiful or intriguing or out of place. There are lots of reasons. And now, if they haven't already, they begin to notice that the reflection isn't quite what they would expect. Perhaps it's the way it moves, or the light, or the colour is wrong. Perhaps they need to look back into the room and check how this reflective surface is portraying the objects it can see. effectively. And this is an invitation to spend quite a bit of time inside your character's mind. So, as well as describing what feels slightly off or strange, let's make sure we know what your character thinks about this and the emotions and intellectual deductions that it is the catalyst for. And now, this is one of the prompts that you can ignore or take on. It's completely up to you. But maybe for the next 5 minutes, we would like to add a new character. This character could be someone your main character already knows, or it could be someone completely new. Perhaps they have some kind of explanation or information about this strange reflective surface. Or maybe they're as in the dark as your first character. If your heart wants to move you to some kind of dialogue, then now we can have someone to have that dialogue with. And if that absolutely doesn't suit the piece you're writing, then completely ignore me and carry on with where your heart takes you. Apologies if you heard a bang during that. I stretched without checking where the furniture was. I can assure you that no authors were hurt during the making of this workshop. Now, let's introduce the sense of touch. Does your character go all in on exploring this surface? Is it something they can dive into, or are they much more tentative? And remember that with touch comes temperature, and perhaps the temperature of this surface is also unexpected. And finally, from this surface comes a sound. How will your two characters, or your single one, react? Are they even more intrigued and drawn into their investigation of this reflective surface? Or are they going to retreat hastily? So that's our final prompt for this session. From this surface comes a sound, the nature of which is entirely up to you, of course. And now, as we move into the last 30 seconds or so of the time we have for writing, if you want to continue onwards, then do hit pause. Your time is your own. That's the wonderful thing about the podcast. If you want to finish with me, then just as we did during the warm-up exercise, we're going to find somewhere intentional to draw this to a close. It might be the end of a sentence, the completion of an idea or a train of thought, the conclusion of an exchange between two characters. And what we might do as well, just as we finish, is often when you're writing, the ideas hit your brain a lot faster than your hands can get them down on paper or than you can type. So if you need to just scribble down a few keywords about where this would go or what those ideas were so you could pick it up later, then that's also a great way to finish. And then what we'll do is we'll just lean back a bit, read over what we've written, and take the opportunity to reflect on some of it and on the topic. Pun intended, I guess, in this session. Don't get to do that very often. So the first thing is that I hope what I've set up here today is something that you absolutely could not complete in 30 minutes of writing. I hope that you're left with a sense that the mystery you've set up here has more to offer and there is more to explore. If you have a vague feeling that you couldn't get it all down, then I would be really delighted with that. That means the workshop has worked well, because my idea is always just to get you going so that you can be writing all the time after this. We've had an exploration of a character who encounters some kind of reflective surface in a setting where they might feel a little bit uncomfortable or unwanted, or know they might be discovered or asked to move on. So we have in the background at the beginning, we might have a little bit of tension in the setting, but it doesn't have to be melodramatic. It might simply be the embarrassment of having wandered into the wrong room in a house. And I hope that the beginning, when you read through, maybe infuses the rest of what you've written. Maybe once your character discovered the reflective surface, they were so intrigued and obsessed by it that all of those other things fell away. That would be amazing too. By setting up with this kind of slight air of them being not where they're supposed to be, I would hope it heightens the idea that once they've found this object or can see this surface, it becomes all they can think about. Obviously, a reflection is a huge metaphor. It has enormous kind of symbolic qualities, but they are so varied that I'm not going to list them out here. But I would love you to read back through your work and think, am I it demonstrating about something about my character and allowing the reader to learn about my character on a slightly more mystical, figurative, metaphorical level about what they can see? Also, it would be interesting to um, read back and see if your character was predominantly looking at themselves. I didn't prompt at any point the idea that the character would be mostly looking at their own reflection. So if what you've come out with is a detailed description of a human face, or, anxiety about the reflection of that character's face, then that tells us quite a lot about them as a character, that's what they could mostly see in this was themselves, rather than, say, the room or the quality of the surface or the nature of the object or the fact that it didn't belong there, or that it looked that it was positioned oddly or was the wrong temperature or the wrong color or moved differently. If your character ignored all of that and instead thought, oh my God, everyone can see my wrinkles, then that's an interesting thing about them, but they're telling us a lot about themselves. As always, I think it's a good idea to go back through your notebooks and occasionally star in the margins or draw around or underline bits of your writing that you think are really good. And the idea is that you begin to develop a dialogue with the page in which it is reflecting back at you things that you like about your writing, and you're picking up these phrases can always be used as writing prompts for other sessions you can just do yourself. Though in this case, as I said, um, there's no way I don't think you could write something sort of very complete and satisfying in the time I've given you. The topic is too big, but that's okay because that's not the job we were doing. The job we were doing was beginning. And once we've begun, of course, it's much easier to carry on. So I hope you enjoyed that session. That came from me racking my brains all day about what today's podcast was going to be about. And I look forward to seeing you again next time.